My husband swore eternal love to me, until I found photos of him with another woman in our own home. I never imagined that the person I trusted most could betray me in the place I felt safest, our own home. My husband, the man who had promised me eternal love, had a secret life I was about to uncover, and I had no idea how deeply it would shake the foundation of my world. It all began on what seemed like an ordinary evening. I was going through the living room, tidying up the shelves and arranging photographs, the mundane tasks of domestic life that often gave me a sense of calm and control. That's when I noticed a small, slightly crumpled envelope tucked behind a framed wedding photo of us. At first, I thought it was just some old letter I had missed, or perhaps a card from a friend that got misplaced. But my gut told me otherwise, a quiet, insistent warning that this was not something I should ignore. Curiosity overcame hesitation. I carefully pulled the envelope from its hiding place and opened it. Inside were photographs, my husband, smiling and laughing, holding a woman I didn't recognize. The initial reaction was disbelief. I stared at the images, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. My hands trembled, and a chill ran down my spine. My home, the place where I felt the safest, had become the setting of my worst nightmare. The photos were recent. There was no question about it. This wasn't a mistake from the past, an old memory, or a fleeting lapse of judgment that had long been resolved. It was happening now, under my roof, while I had been living in blissful ignorance. The magnitude of the betrayal was crushing. My chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, and a mixture of disbelief, anger, and sorrow collided inside me. I sat down on the couch, the photographs trembling in my hands. My thoughts were a whirlwind. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Did he even think about me? The man I had trusted completely, who had promised to love me forever, had broken every vow we had ever made. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments in my mind. Every laugh, every affectionate glance, every whispered "I love you" suddenly felt like a lie. I remembered nights when he claimed to be working late, days he said he was meeting friends, the way he sometimes checked his phone nervously when I entered the room. All of it now felt like pieces of a puzzle whose image was betrayal. The following morning, I tried to act normal. I spoke to him, laughed at his jokes, shared coffee with him as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was screaming. My heart ached with the knowledge of the photographs, the reality that he had been with another woman, while I believed we were building a life together. Every time he glanced at me, my mind questioned everything. Did he feel guilty? Did he enjoy the deception? How could he live with himself while I remained unaware? Days turned into a torturous routine. I started noticing little things that I had ignored before: a lipstick stain on a shirt he claimed was his, a faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine, messages on his phone that he quickly deleted when I walked past. Each small clue confirmed my worst fears. The betrayal was not a single mistake. It was a pattern, a secret life carefully hidden from me. I began to question everything about our marriage. The promises of love, loyalty, and partnership now seemed meaningless. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and powerless in the place I had always considered my sanctuary. My home, once a haven, felt like a cage, a place where deceit had quietly grown while I remained blind. Anger eventually replaced the initial shock. I became determined to uncover the full truth. I had to know the extent of his betrayal before confronting him. Every day, I observed him, watched for signs, and pieced together what little I could. The tension was unbearable, the anxiety constant. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I could not wake from, trapped in a reality where the person I loved most was capable of destroying the life we had built. The days that followed were some of the hardest I had ever experienced. My mind could not rest, and sleep became a fleeting luxury as the images from the photographs haunted me constantly. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw him laughing with her, felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me as if the walls of our home were closing in. I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus, and even the simplest tasks felt like monumental challenges. I was trapped in a storm of emotions, a whirlwind of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. I decided that I needed more than just the photographs. I had to know the truth in its entirety. I began to search for evidence, following small clues and observing his routines. It was exhausting and heartbreaking. I looked at his phone when he wasn't around, discovering messages that confirmed my worst fears. Texts filled with affection, plans for secret meetings, photos he had taken with her, proof that he had built a hidden life behind my back. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined, and with each new piece of evidence, my world crumbled a little further. The sense of violation was overwhelming. My home, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a place of deceit and lies. I found myself walking through the rooms, imagining her presence in the spaces we had shared, imagining their laughter echoing in our living room, their secrets whispered where we had once whispered our own dreams. The intimacy we had built, the life we had shared, suddenly felt like a fragile illusion, shattered by his choices. I confronted him the first time, after gathering undeniable proof. My hands shook, my voice trembled, but I forced myself to speak. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did you do this to us?" He tried to explain, to justify, to make excuses, but none of it mattered. The trust was gone. The love I had believed in, the promises he had made, had been broken in the most fundamental way. My heart ached not only for myself, but for the life we had lost, the dreams that had been built on lies. The confrontation was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, I uncovered more details, dates, places, moments that he had stolen from our life together. Each revelation was like another strike, another blow to my already fragile heart. I realized that the betrayal had not been a single lapse in judgment, it had been a long, calculated series of actions, a double life carefully hidden in plain sight. The magnitude of it left me feeling hollow, betrayed in the deepest sense. I also had to navigate the reactions of our family and friends. Many had known about the affair, or at least suspected it, and I was confronted with uncomfortable truths about loyalty, secrecy, and the complexity of human relationships. People I had trusted, people I thought would stand by me, had kept silent, choosing convenience over honesty. It was another layer of heartbreak, another challenge to my sense of trust and security. During this time, I learned about the other woman, her life, her intentions, the ways she had inserted herself into our marriage. It was painful to realize that she was not just a passive participant, but an active choice, someone he had chosen over the life we had built together. The humiliation, the anger, the sorrow, it all blended into a complex emotional storm that I struggled to survive each day. Despite the devastation, I began to find small moments of clarity. I realized that I could not let his actions define my life entirely. I started documenting everything, writing down events, conversations, evidence. I needed to understand the full scope, to process it all fully, and eventually, to confront him with the complete picture of his betrayal. Each entry in my notebook became a piece of armor, a way to reclaim some control in a situation where I had felt powerless. In the quiet moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, I allowed myself to grieve not just for the marriage, but for the version of myself that had believed in his love unquestioningly. The pain was unbearable at times, but I knew that acknowledging it was necessary. I could not move forward without facing the depth of the hurt, the betrayal, and the loss. As the days turned into weeks, my resolve grew. I knew that the next steps would be the hardest, deciding whether to fight for what remained of our marriage, whether to seek closure through legal and emotional means, or whether to let go entirely and rebuild a life without him. The decisions were daunting, but for the first time since discovering the photographs, I felt a flicker of agency, a sense that I could navigate the aftermath on my own terms. As the weeks went by, the reality of my situation began to sink in fully. It wasn't just a fleeting betrayal, it was a pattern, a lifestyle he had hidden so carefully that I began to question every memory, every shared moment, every promise he had ever made. The home that once felt like a sanctuary was now a labyrinth of doubts and fears. I started noticing things I had overlooked before: secret calls he would take in the other room, messages that disappeared when I wasn't looking, small inconsistencies in his stories. Each tiny detail became a thread that, when pulled, unraveled the fabric of our marriage. I started having sleepless nights, pacing the halls, trying to make sense of what had happened. I questioned myself constantly. Had I missed signs? Was there something I could have done differently? The self-doubt was suffocating. I felt simultaneously foolish for trusting him, and enraged at the audacity of his lies. My friends tried to console me, but the truth is, no words could fill the void created by knowing that the man I loved was living a double life right under my nose. One night, I found myself standing in front of our bedroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me, the person who felt betrayed, angry, sad, and yet determined to reclaim her life. I realized that while he had shattered my trust, I still had control over my actions and my future. It was a bitter realization, but it was also a necessary one. I needed to decide whether to confront him fully, expose everything, and seek justice, or whether to quietly sever the ties and protect myself from further pain. The next morning, I confronted him again, this time with the complete evidence I had gathered. The photographs, the messages, the dates, the locations, everything laid out on the table. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. There was no defense strong enough to cover the truth. He admitted everything: the affair, the deception, the lies. The honesty was twisted. It didn't feel like liberation, but rather confirmation of a pain I had tried to avoid facing. After the confrontation, I took some time away to process everything. I stayed with a close friend, someone who had supported me since the beginning, and tried to rebuild a sense of normalcy in my daily life. It wasn't easy. Every place I went, every object I touched, reminded me of him, of her, and of the betrayal that had occurred. Yet, slowly, I started to reclaim small pieces of my life. I cooked, I cleaned, I laughed a little. It was a painful, gradual process, but it marked the beginning of my healing. Meanwhile, he tried to plead, to convince me to forgive him, to rebuild what had been broken. But trust, once shattered so completely, is not easily repaired. I realized that forgiving him would not erase the pain or the lies. It would only allow him to continue controlling my emotions. I could not allow that. I needed to regain my power, my sense of self, and my ability to live without constant fear of betrayal. I also had to navigate the legal aspects of separation. Consulting with a lawyer, gathering documentation, understanding my rights, it was overwhelming. The financial entanglements, shared property, and emotional bonds all made the process feel even more complex. Yet, each step forward was a step toward freedom, toward reclaiming a life that had been disrupted by his choices. During this time, I reflected on our marriage, on what we had shared, and on what had gone wrong. I realized that no amount of love or devotion could have prevented him from making the choices he did. It was not my fault. The responsibility lay entirely with him, and accepting this was crucial for my emotional recovery. I had to stop blaming myself and start focusing on rebuilding a life free from deceit and manipulation. Through all of this, I learned something painful but essential: betrayal changes a person, but it does not have to destroy them. I could be hurt, angry, and sad, but I could also be resilient. I could grieve what I had lost while simultaneously preparing for a future where I was in control. The journey was far from over, but I began to see glimpses of hope, a life where I could once again trust, love, and find happiness, free from the shadow of his betrayal. The confrontation had left a scar, but it also ignited a determination I hadn't known I possessed. I realized that the man I had loved, the one I thought would be my partner for life, had chosen someone else over me. That betrayal, raw and unforgiving, had left a void that no apology could fill. Yet, in that emptiness, I found clarity. I needed to reclaim my life on my terms, to redefine who I was without him. The days after the confrontation were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. I went through our shared spaces, removing reminders of him, his belongings, photographs, little trinkets that once symbolized our love. Each removal was like peeling off layers of pain, exposing wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. I cried, I screamed, I questioned every decision I had made that led me here, but slowly, I began to feel a sense of liberation. I realized that by letting go of the remnants of our life together, I was creating room for myself, for healing, and for growth. Navigating the separation was complicated. We had shared assets, a home filled with memories, and routines that had intertwined our lives so tightly that disentangling them felt almost impossible. Lawyers, meetings, and legal documents became my new reality, and though it was exhausting, it was also empowering. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was actively shaping my future. Each decision, each boundary I set, reminded me that I had agency, that I could control the path my life would take from this point forward. Meanwhile, he tried repeatedly to reach out, to manipulate, to draw me back into a cycle of lies. I had to be strong, to resist the temptation to listen to his pleas. Forgiveness was not a gift I owed him. It was something I could consider only when I felt secure in my own healing. For now, detachment was necessary. I had to protect my heart, my mind, and my sense of self from further harm. Amid this turmoil, I found unexpected support. Friends who had watched from the sidelines, worried for me, became pillars of strength. They offered not only a shoulder to cry on, but also guidance and perspective. They reminded me of my worth, of my resilience, and of the life I still had to live. Their encouragement, combined with my own determination, gave me the courage to envision a future that was no longer defined by his betrayal. During this time, I also began to explore my own passions and interests, things I had neglected while immersed in the complexities of our marriage. I took long walks, read books that inspired me, and pursued hobbies that had once brought me joy. These small acts of self-care became a lifeline, helping me rebuild my identity and reminding me that I was more than a spouse, more than a victim of infidelity. I was a whole person, capable of joy, creativity, and love both for myself and eventually for others. The emotional roller coaster was relentless. Some days, grief and anger would overwhelm me, leaving me drained and desolate. Other days, I would feel sparks of hope, imagining a life that was free from lies, manipulation, and heartbreak. The contrast was jarring, but it was also a sign that healing was underway. Each emotional wave, each moment of vulnerability, was a step toward reclaiming control over my life and my destiny. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see tangible changes. The house, once filled with tension and deceit, felt lighter, quieter, and more peaceful. I had established routines that centered on my well-being, my happiness, and my growth. I started to dream again, not of the life I had lost, but of the one I could build from scratch, one that was grounded in authenticity, trust, and self-respect. Despite the pain, I found that I could forgive, not to reconcile with him, but to release myself from the grip of bitterness. Forgiveness became a tool for liberation, a way to reclaim my emotional energy and redirect it toward myself. I no longer carried the weight of his choices, I carried only the lessons they had taught me. By this point, I realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it had also been a catalyst for growth. It had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, to face my vulnerabilities, and to discover a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I was no longer the person who had blindly trusted. I was someone wiser, stronger, and ready to embrace a life that was entirely my own. The journey was far from over. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and reminders of the pain he had caused. But I had learned that I could navigate these obstacles with resilience, self-respect, and a commitment to my own well-being. The path forward was mine to walk, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope, possibility, and freedom. Months had passed since the betrayal, yet the echoes of his deception lingered in the corners of my mind. Each memory, each reminder of the life we once shared, carried both pain and a strange sense of nostalgia. I realized that healing wasn't a linear process. It came in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing down with unexpected force. But with each wave, I found a little more strength, a little more clarity, and a deeper understanding of who I was without him. During this time, I focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I moved into a new apartment, one that was entirely mine, where the walls held no secrets, and the rooms no lingering whispers of betrayal. I decorated it with care, choosing colors and furniture that reflected my personality and tastes. Every detail, from the curtains to the pictures on the wall, was a statement of independence, a declaration that my life was now under my control. Work became a sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, meetings, and deadlines, finding solace in productivity and accomplishment. My colleagues noticed a change in me in energy, a confidence that had been buried under months of heartache. I felt proud of what I could achieve on my own, without relying on anyone else for validation. Each completed task, each professional success, became a small victory, reminding me that I was capable, resilient, and deserving of respect. Evenings, which had once been filled with shared routines and empty conversations, became moments for self-reflection. I journaled, meditated, and allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions that came with recovery. There were nights when tears flowed freely, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. Yet, there were also nights filled with laughter, music, and quiet contentment. These contrasting experiences taught me that healing was not about forgetting or moving on too quickly. It was about embracing my emotions and learning to live with them in a balanced way. Friends played a crucial role in this stage of my life. They reminded me of my worth when I doubted myself, offered guidance when decisions felt overwhelming, and provided a safe space to express both sorrow and hope. Their support reinforced the understanding that I was not alone, that I could navigate this journey without being defined by the actions of another person. They celebrated my small victories, listened without judgment, and reminded me that life still held beauty, even after immense pain. As I began to emerge from the shadow of betrayal, I also reconnected with family members who had remained neutral during the upheaval. Their acceptance and encouragement helped me rebuild trust in others and reminded me that love, in its purest form, can still exist even after deceit. I started to form new bonds, deepen existing ones, and appreciate the relationships that had always been genuine. This network of support became a foundation upon which I could rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. The journey also led me to confront uncomfortable truths about my own expectations, choices, and the dynamics of our relationship. I examined the ways I had contributed to patterns that allowed betrayal to flourish, not to blame myself, but to understand and grow. This introspection was painful but necessary. It revealed strengths I hadn't acknowledged and weaknesses I could now address. I learned that self-awareness was a powerful tool for ensuring that I would never lose myself in another toxic relationship. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from him, my ex-husband. I had imagined this moment countless times, wondering what he might say, how I would react. But when I opened it, I felt a calm detachment I hadn't expected. His words, filled with excuses and attempts to justify his actions, did not pierce me as they once might have. I read them, acknowledged them, and set the letter aside. I had no need for his validation or forgiveness. I had already found both within myself. In the weeks that followed, I began to explore new experiences and opportunities. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see, joined clubs and groups that aligned with my interests, and even considered new career paths. Each step was a deliberate choice to embrace life fully, without fear of betrayal or loss. I was discovering the joy of living authentically, of making decisions that reflected my desires, rather than someone else's expectations. Love, once tainted by deceit, became something I approached cautiously but openly. I realized that being hurt did not mean I had to close my heart entirely. It meant I had to be wiser, more discerning, and more attuned to my own needs. I learned to recognize red flags, trust my instincts, and communicate clearly. These lessons were hard-earned but invaluable, shaping the way I approached relationships in a healthier, more balanced way. By this point, the pain of betrayal had transformed into a quiet strength. I no longer dwelled on the past with bitterness. Instead, I used it as a guide to build a future rooted in self-respect, authenticity, and emotional resilience. I had survived one of the most devastating experiences of my life, and in doing so, I had discovered a capacity for growth, forgiveness, and empowerment that I had never imagined. The journey was far from over, but I now faced it with confidence. I had learned that life could continue, even after betrayal, and that happiness was not dependent on another person's loyalty. It was something I could cultivate within myself. Each day became a testament to my resilience, a reminder that I could overcome heartbreak and emerge stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever life had to offer next. By the time the final pieces of my life had fallen into place, I had become someone unrecognizable from the person who had first discovered the betrayal. The grief and anger that once consumed me had transformed into clarity, resilience, and a profound understanding of my own worth. I had rebuilt my life, layer by layer, like a fragile but enduring mosaic, each piece representing lessons learned, pain endured, and victories both small and monumental claimed along the way. One evening, as I sat in my newly painted apartment, sipping tea and listening to the soft hum of the city outside, I reflected on the journey I had endured. The silence was no longer heavy, it was liberating. I realized that every tear, every sleepless night, and every pang of heartbreak had forged a version of myself capable of genuine strength and empathy. I was no longer defined by the betrayal I had suffered but by the courage with which I had faced it and the determination with which I had rebuilt my life. During this period, unexpected opportunities arose. My work gained recognition beyond my immediate circle, opening doors to collaborations and projects I had never imagined. Invitations to speak at workshops, lead seminars, and mentor younger colleagues became more frequent. At first, I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to step into such visibility after the chaos I had endured. But then I realized that my experiences, painful as they had given me a voice, a perspective that could help others navigate similar challenges. Sharing my story, offering guidance, and listening to others' struggles became a source of healing not just for them, but for me as well. Friendships deepened too. Those who had stood by me through the darkest days were no longer just companions, they were family. We celebrated milestones together, supported each other through setbacks, and shared in the simple joys that once seemed trivial, but now felt precious. I learned that trust, while difficult to rebuild, was possible when nurtured with patience, honesty, and mutual respect. This realization reshaped the way I approached all my relationships, both personal and professional, reinforcing the understanding that the quality of connections mattered far more than quantity. Romantic relationships, however, required the most delicate attention. After months of reflection and personal growth, I allowed myself to slowly open my heart again. But this time, I approached love with awareness and discernment. I no longer sought validation or completeness from another person. Instead, I sought a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and authenticity. I discovered that love, when approached mindfully, could be a source of joy rather than a potential source of pain. And while I remained cautious, I embraced the possibility of new beginnings with a hopeful yet grounded heart. The past, once a source of relentless torment, became a reference point rather than a burden. I revisited old memories not with resentment, but with understanding. I acknowledged the mistakes, recognized the lessons, and appreciated the resilience that had carried me through. The betrayal that had once shattered my sense of reality had, paradoxically, become a catalyst for profound transformation. I was no longer the same person who had walked into that house, naive and trusting. I had emerged wiser, stronger, and more attuned to my own needs, desires, and boundaries. One day, I unexpectedly ran into him, my ex-husband, at a public event. Time had changed us both. He looked different, older in ways that only experience could mark, and I felt no anger or need for confrontation. The encounter was brief, a polite nod, a few words exchanged, and then we parted ways. I walked away lighter than I had in years. The past no longer held power over me. It had been acknowledged, faced, and released. The encounter felt symbolic, like closing a long-standing chapter, and finally stepping into a space of true freedom. As I continued to navigate life, I also began giving back in ways I had never anticipated. I volunteered for organizations that supported individuals going through relationship crises, sharing my insights, listening without judgment, and helping others find the strength to reclaim their lives. It became a mission, not just an act of service, but a form of personal catharsis. Each person I helped, each story I witnessed, reinforced the truth that recovery and empowerment were possible, even after the most devastating betrayals. Family ties, too, experienced renewal. Relationships with relatives strained by the divorce or by his actions slowly healed. My honesty, vulnerability, and consistent effort to communicate openly helped bridge gaps that once seemed unrepairable. Celebrations, holidays, and even casual gatherings no longer carried the weight of past tensions. Instead, they became opportunities to cultivate love, laughter, and genuine connection, a testament to the resilience of family bonds when nurtured with care and understanding. In the end, I realized that life had not only continued, it had improved. The betrayal, once a source of unrelenting pain, had catalyzed a transformation that reshaped my world in ways I could never have predicted. I was not just surviving, I was thriving. I had cultivated independence, deepened meaningful connections, discovered purpose, and learned the value of self-respect and authenticity. My heart, though once wounded, had healed, and my spirit had emerged unbroken. I now stand at a place of profound gratitude. For the lessons, for the resilience discovered, for the support of friends and family, and for the ability to reclaim my life with dignity and strength. The journey from heartbreak to healing was arduous, but it was also enlightening, empowering, and ultimately transformative. And as I look toward the future, I do so with confidence, knowing that I am capable of navigating whatever life may bring, armed with wisdom, courage, and an unshakable sense of self-worth.